Well, architecture really is sculpture if you think about it. You know, Marcel Duchamp, the great sculptor, said sculpture is architecture without plumbing, which means that, you know, the minute you have plumbing, you have architecture, and in that sense you also have a sculpture that is utilitarian. But from the beginning of time, architecture has been a sculpture. From the Greeks and in China and in all societies, and in the Renaissance, if you think about it, it was practiced mainly by sculptors and only later by architects. The most important thing is that architecture is a science, of course. You have a scientific basis. It's also an art, but most importantly, it's really the mother of the arts, which means it's based on memory. And what is memory? Memory is to think freely. That's what we call, the ancient Greeks called the liberal arts, the free arts, the arts of the free mind, which means geometry, astronomy, poetry, tragedy, history, language. That's what architecture is based on. So today, in an era of technology, we often forget that really the reason for architecture is not just to think about it with your mind, but to involve yourself in the culture of the place and of the world. And so that's really the center of architecture. It's the humanistic art. It's not just a mechanical art. Well, The Edge of Order is a book to be read, of course, also to be looked at, because it's designed, it's interesting to see. But it is a story. It tells a story, and it's a story that I believe is important because, as I say in the book, everyone has interest in architecture. Every person already knows a lot about architecture the minute they have some corner that they sleep in. They already know the horizon of the world. So we are all really in search of a home. And that is why the book was written, because as I said in the beginning of the book, we are also threatened by two things, always. By order. We are threatened by order and disorder at the same time. So, you know, a lot of people want to order the world and tell you how to march into the future, which is a very bad idea. And a lot of people just protest and sort of anarchically fight against it, which is also a bad idea. So what is the middle way? How do we negotiate between these two extreme poles, which really are very fatal for the future of the world, and how to bring people together and architecture really into the center of life? Great buildings, you know, from the pyramids and, you know, from Stonehenge and back into Altmira caves. They were all sculptures. We are inspired. I'm inspired by these amazing buildings. Of course, throughout history, we see it. And those are the buildings that have stayed memorable. Every piece of art, every piece of architecture, somebody has to make it. It's not anonymous. Everybody has a signature. Sometimes the signature is denied or hidden because there's nothing much behind it. But for those architects who I admire, those artists who I admire, writers, filmmakers, poets, composers, there's always a sense of where it's coming from. It's coming from your life, your experience, your vision, your integrity. So yeah, that's what really the definition of architecture, as I see it, is. It's an art form, and just like a good book, it has to have an author. And what is a good book? It's a book whose author is transmitting something, communicating something that has to do really with life and not just with imagination. But you have to be a good storyteller. If you're not a good storyteller, you should not be an architect. I was a professional musician, but I didn't give up music. I just changed my instrument from a musical instrument to architectural instrument. And of course that shapes your way through the labyrinth. Labyrinth means every project deserves a thought about how to make it. Each project is different, each place is different. You can't apply the same method to every building. You have to invent a method for each building in order to come out of the labyrinth. And so yes, that is really based on experience and what I really do. Well, what is important for architecture is to emphasize that it's a participatory art. It's not just about the ego of the architect, it's about the people. And that means you need democracy to create architecture, because you need to involve really the cross-section of all people who are involved in a city. And that's really, to me, the key dimension of architecture is participation, which means a democratic society bringing consensus to all issues, and not really from the top down, but really from a discourse that involves everyone, including people who are often not given the voice. Sorry, excellent. Change chair.